Thank you all for joining us. Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome candidates for Clark County Council, District 3, I believe. It should mention this is the seat currently held by Karen Bowerman, who is not seeking re-election. So we have 3 candidates and appreciate you joining us. Why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourself, explain why you are running, and then we will get into specific policy questions. And we'll start with Chuck.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Chuck Keplar. My wife and I came to Clark County back in 2000, chose to raise our family here. Love this. It's been my home, continues to be my home. It's a place where not only my kids, but my grandkids are also being raised. And so I got into this because I'm really just tired of seeing people who are running for elections saying that they'll do all kinds of things, and then when they get elected, they don't do the things that they say. And so I'm running to hopefully change that dynamic and just be a person of my word. The things that I run on, the things that I say I'll do, I'll do.
Great, thank you. John?
Yeah, my name is John Jay, and I'm also running for the Clark County Council, and I am very active in our community. I'm a member of the Clark County Parks Advisory Board. I'm a member of several local Chamber of Commerce committees, such as the Government and Public Affairs, as well as the Workforce Development and Education committees. And I'm the treasurer of my Rotary Club as well. And I'm running to make housing more affordable in Clark County while still protecting our open spaces and what makes Clark County special. I'm very much a believer in making sure that our Sheriff's Department has the resources that they need to keep our community safe. I want to help improve our infrastructure and our traffic here and try to mitigate that problem in this county as well, within the powers of the county government, obviously. So that is a little bit about me.
Great, thank you. And Wil.
Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Wil Fuentes. I am also running for Clark County Council District 3. I have been living in the Pacific Northwest for 16 years. I love Vancouver. Vancouver is now my forever home. It's where I intend to spend the rest of my life. And after spending some time working in the community the last couple of years, particularly at a nonprofit called Fourth Plane Forward, I understand the challenges that people experience, whether it's challenges with housing, challenges with homelessness, challenges with addiction and substance abuse. I understand. I'm out on the ground talking to people day in, day out, speaking to small business owners to understand, the struggles that they're dealing with. And I believe with my lived experience, with my academic experience, professional experience, sitting on the Clark County Low Income Housing Committee, 5 years of planning commissioner, I think I can make a difference in my community. I care a lot about the people that I work with, the people that I live with, and I'm just excited and passionate to be able to affect change, that long-lasting change that will allow us to have a better future, a vibrant and community-focused Clark County.
Great, thank you. And thanks again to each of you for joining us. I want to start out, one of the primary issues obviously is homelessness in the community. What do you believe should be the county government's role and how would you approach that? And we'll start this time with Wil.
Absolutely. I think the county council or the county government plays a big role in addressing the issues with homelessness. These are our neighbors. They're our family members. They're their parents, siblings, and they need our support. The county council or county currently collects 1% mental health tax. A lot of those resources are currently being allocated to the renovation of the jail. That needs to stop. I can appreciate what they're doing in wanting to provide treatment for substance abuse and addiction at the jail, but we shouldn't have to wait for our community members to be incarcerated, to be locked up, to access those type of services. Those services need to happen before they end up in jail. What I propose is that we allocate some of those resources to ensuring that we provide treatment before people get incarcerated, that we partner up with community-based organizations to be able to provide support in any event that folks need emergency services before law enforcement is included in the equation. The Columbia River Mental Health is a really good example within the city of Vancouver that provides the community response team. So these folks are out in the community working with people who are struggling with substance abuse and addiction and providing compassionate support when needed. I think that we can propose these type of solutions with these folks. I think that we should also partner up with the city of Vancouver and follow some other model to be able to address the homeless issue in unincorporated Clark County. Clark County has the second largest homeless population in the county. And unincorporated Clark County has the second largest homeless population in the county. And these folks need support. Safe State Villages, I visited a couple of them. They provide supportive services for folks who are transitioning from the streets into housing. I think we could follow that model as well, utilizing some of the mental health taxes.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back with some follow-up questions on that, but I want to get to John, what role should the county play?
I think the county has to be a working partner with the city of Vancouver. Right now, the county council is often hiding behind the process related to the mental health sales tax fund. That to not be an effective partner with the county, with the city of Vancouver, in the sense that we have an opportunity to invest in a new shelter in this county that will allow us to bed and house 150 people to bring them up to speed and provide the resources that they need. But at the end of the day, I also believe that we need to make sure that the support that the county council does provide is compassionate in the sense that we provide real job training, real mental health support, and not necessarily rely on all those tax dollars, as Wil mentioned, to go to the jail and have the primary resource that to be put there. I think we need to work with the city council and work with the city government. I know that there's some issues working between the county staff and the city staff, and oftentimes it can feel like my way or the highway. But at the end of the day, both sides have to come together and work together to solve this issue, because when the homeless community might not know the boundaries of when the city begins and when unincorporated Clark County begins, we need to have a solution that works together with all parties involved. And I think that the bridge shelter project is a way forward to at least open up the dialogue for both sides to work together to address this problem.
Well, and that's what I wanted to follow up on. So you would be in favor of the county supporting the bridge shelter?
At least as my current understanding. I know that a lot of this real estate conversations have to happen behind the scenes because that's how governments buy real estate and all that. And so I think at least the conversation needs to be able to move forward rather than the county putting up process for some people to access these funds and not the same process for others. I think that it's not a good working relationship, it seems, from my outside perspective.
And I'll get to Chuck in a sec. Since John brought it up, would you support the county helping with the bridge shelter?
Absolutely. Yeah, those 150 beds are definitely needed to be able to address the homeless issue here in Clark County. And it's particularly true with folks who are transitioning from the jail or from mental health facilities who have absolutely nowhere else to go. This is what the population that they will serve. And so we absolutely need to collaborate with the city of Vancouver and make sure that that it's open sooner than later.
Okay, Chuck, what should the county's role be regarding homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there needs to be collaborative efforts that include law enforcement, social services, mental health services, education starting at a young level, and the government as well. I think having been able to tour the Clark County Jail, while I understand that funds are always an issue, the current situation in the jail is not great in terms of being able to serve the people who are there. And at some point, those services need to be able to address those people so that when they're coming to that point, that they're getting the services they need so they can come out and be a positive, productive member of society and not back into the same mental health issues, the same addiction issues, and those sorts of things. I would definitely move away from the harm reduction type solutions. I don't think that giving out 500,000 needles a year is a productive solution, as much as it would be to address these issues, not only in training with law enforcement, but also just pulling together the community services, mental health services, and education that's needed in that.
So with the recent request from the city for financial support for the bridge shelter, would you have supported that if you were on the council?
I would not have supported it. I think the issue is much greater than 150 beds. When you look at the homeless population, and as Wil said, one of the biggest homeless populations, the 150 beds is currently a Band-Aid on an issue that's much, much bigger than that and needs to be addressed in much bigger ways.
Great, thank you. Colin?
one of the big issues that the county council confronts every year has to do with the property tax and with the 1% cap. Some people feel that's inadequate. Others say we don't really, even that 1% is a big hit for our property owners. Starting with Chuck, what's your take on the property tax? Do you support doing that 1% every year? Should there be a better way, a different way? What's your stance?
Yeah, man, I definitely support I think the cap at 1% a year is great. I think it needs to be evaluated on a budget and needs basis, but it also needs to be evaluated from the points of the people of Clark County. The amount of inflation that we've experienced recently and how strapped the families of Clark County are. This would definitely be a time where I would be against that simple 1%, as much as it sounds, but 1% is a huge deal when families are struggling.
I can understand that, but then haven't expenses gone up for county services as well?
Sure, they have, but the expenses for the county services since 2015 have gone up 50%, where population's gone up 15%. And so there's been services added. And so to me, it's like any other time when a family has issues with their budget, if they could go out and make more money, they do it. But what they have to do is they have to look at what they're spending. They have to decide on what's the most important, and they have to put their money to that. And I think that the county government should be required to do the same thing. The county government needs to look at its budget, needs to decide on what's the most important things to have in that budget, and take the things that are not as imperative right now and cut back on them, rather than passing along a burden to families that are already struggling. These are the types of things that I would even say that lead into that homelessness, housing expense. All of these things are growing at such a rate that they cannot be sustained.
So if it were solely up to you, if you were the king of the county, what services would you cut to make that budget?
Well, again, I'd have to go back and to see what all those increases are. So I haven't had full access to that budget, but it would be the same thing. And it wouldn't just be, I mean, obviously you say if I'm the king of the county, but we've got to look at those things and say, what is the most important things to this county? There are things that are imperative to growth. So things like zoning and dealing with the Growth Management Act and the review of that. Looking at the government in places that's operating well and functioning well, and then looking at other places and saying, well, you know what, this may be a great thing, but it's not fantastic right now.
But for now, you don't have any specific.
I don't have any specifics on that in terms of cuts. No.
Okay. I'm sorry,
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
So John, the same for you. The 1% property cap, what is your stance on that?
Yeah, I think prior to implementing any 1% property tax increase, as is permitted by the council and other local governments by the state law, we have to look at any redundancies, any issues with the county budget to make sure that before we go forth and ask the community for this tax effectively, we should make sure that our own house is in order. As Chuck's mentioned, families are also struggling. And so when families are struggling, if they can increase revenues, potentially they look at it. But if we grow the economy, we can also access other different revenue sources. But looking at any redundancies that are within the current county budget is something that should be a priority. But also we should look at the transparency about how this information is provided, because if anyone's ever tried to look up the county budget, it's a pretty difficult document to understand. And as often been said, is that only the folks who really understand the county budget are the folks that work in the county budget office. So how do we, from a good faith position, ask the community for a 1% tax increase, which might be necessary, and it's definitely something that I would be open to. But I want to make sure that before we go forth and ask, how do we make sure that our own house is in order, and how that information is more effectively relayed to the community so they know that this tax increase, property tax increase, will be used for XYZ services very clearly and deliberately. But I'd also like to address that a lot of these recent spike in spending in the county's budget hasn't been done by just natural growth of the county, but a lot of that has been done by influx of federal cash. And so that is also going to be going away, but the county has done a pretty decent job of making sure that this one-time expenses aren't used to pay for continuous expenses. So.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to follow. Chuck, is that accurate that much of the growth in spending is an influx of federal money?
Well, that federal money, so that would only account for, since 2020 and those things. So I don't believe it's the majority, and it's still the amount is still skewed in terms of the general expense budget for the county.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. No, Will, the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. Inflation has been definitely been a culprit in increasing costs for a lot of folks. Obviously, for struggling families, for struggling individuals, for all community members. And it's the case with county services. Everything's gotten really out of reach for a lot of folks. I would support the 1% cap increase in taxes. It is unfortunate that we need to make those type of financial decisions in order to maintain the services that are essential to keeping a healthy Clark County. We need to make sure that our law enforcement, that firefighters, they're all fully funded. One of my biggest concerns, and it's something that's been happening a lot over the last few years, is an increase in wildfires. Firefighters need to be fully funded. And if we don't have the funding to be able to support them, I'm concerned about the challenges and the threat of continued wildfires in our county. So I would absolutely support the 1% increase.
And just to go back, John, did you say for say this year, would you support the 1% increase? I don't remember if you said whether you would or not.
For this year,
Yeah. Or do you need more information?
I haven't had a chance to, well, I mean, for this year, I think it seems like with inflation, it might be necessary. I would be definitely open to.
Okay,
would
just
be open
wanted
to
to
it.
follow that up because I think they both.
I don't know if I necessarily agree that it should be an every year thing. I know that we just did it last time for the first time in like 10, 20 years or so was the last time the county council implemented it. So it could be.
Talk about what your opinions are about the growth management planning process, where we're at with that, and what the county council's role is in trying to reconcile the seemingly impossible goals of continuing to preserve open space, but providing more space for housing and jobs. So that's an impossible question. So want to try first, John?
Yeah. Well, we have to take a long, hard look at our current buildable lands report and get creative with how we look at our zoning laws to see if we can fill within our urban growth area as much as possible. I think the county council needs to look at other things such as our impact fees to make it cheaper to build houses as well as potentially, I already mentioned, look at our zoning laws, but I think there is a possibility that we do need to look at, after all options have been exhausted, looking at expanding our urban growth area, but only with knowledge and belief that we have actually fully met the capacity within our current urban growth area, because we do need to protect our open spaces. We do need to protect our local environment. That is why people live here. That is what makes Clark County special. And so with that in mind, I do think that it is definitely a tough needle to thread for the county, and that will require more density, but it doesn't mean that density is the only one size fits all solution. We should have housing options of different types required and work with different cities. And I think a lot of times with the way the council currently worked and providing only a one size solution for all the cities is also an issue, with the exception of Camas. I think we should empower other local officials as well and not necessarily hold all that within the power of the county.
Chuck, what's your take on this problem?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think it's a huge issue that's going to require a lot of work to be able to solve. But I think that the Growth Management Act, zoning are big things that need to be handled by the county. I think that that these are the things that are driving housing prices up and causing so many issues for families. And so I would not only be open to expanding that area, but there's other things in not only the cost of regulation. The cost of regulation for houses has doubled in the last 15 years. And the number of available lots right now is 14 to 1,500. I think that needs to be increased by 50%, because what we have going on right now is builders all bidding on the same lands to try to be able to build houses, and it's forcing those prices up. When you put that in hand with the cost of regulation for builders, houses have gone up $200,000 without the builder making a penny more. And so these are big issues, and I think it is unfortunate, and it needs to be done with care and with community involvement. But I think that land needs to be opened up to be able to build, especially as we look at the growth and the potential growth of Clark County over the next 20 years.
Do you think how much of that is under the purview of the county council?
Yeah,
Or how much, or how is it limited by the?
yes. I mean, so obviously there's only the zoning part of that is very much under the purview of the council, and the council has the ability to do just that. There is the ability to open up some more of those available lands within our current boundaries, and increase that number of 14 to 1,500 available lands to 22 to 2,500, and again bring those costs down. Just those things right there would bring housing costs down $150,000 a house.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what would you like
Yeah.
to crack at it?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a very difficult issue to solve, but I think, I don't remember which one of my competitors, I suppose. Yeah, which one of my competitors mentioned that one of the reasons, we live in Vancouver and Clark County is because we love its beauty, we love its natural spaces, and we want to preserve that. We want to preserve the natural environment. We want to preserve the productive farmland. As of now, understand that Clark County is looking at growing up to 200, well, based on some projections, almost 200,000 folks over the next 20 years. That is a lot of people that we need to accommodate, right? And so, however, looking at the urban growth area boundaries now, I believe that there is ample land to build within those boundaries. Definitely within the city of Vancouver, definitely within the city of Camas, Washougal, and Battleground. I mean, just the urban growth boundary around Vancouver is twice the size of the city, right? So it's almost another 50 square miles of developable land that can be utilized to increase housing within the urban growth area and preserve farmland and preserve our natural environment so that people of Clark County have easy access to that. And I imagine we'll talk about housing, but I think that one of the ways that we can preserve, our natural built environment and still build within the urban growth boundary is zoning reform, right? Within unincorporated county. So the county has no jurisdiction over Vancouver. They have no jurisdiction over Camas or Washougal or any of the other jurisdictions. But they do within unincorporated Clark County where 160,000 folks live. There are opportunities for the county to look at current zoning that was established 40, 50, 60 years ago that just isn't realistic right now. It's not practical for the growth that we are expecting if we're to preserve our natural environment. We need to look at allowing for increased density along major corridors with easy access to public transportation by reducing the number of parking spaces that are required. We need to look at allowing for rezoning in certain areas that will allow for folks to build ADUs, to build duplexes or triplexes. This will allow for more housing, for more inventory. And another thing that I'm going to say, and this is something, so I'm a program and housing development manager for Growth Paying Forward. And so we're looking at acquiring property across Clark County. And one of the challenges within Clark County, unincorporated Clark County, is the very extremely complicated and convoluted permitting process. It is very, very complicated, much more than in any other jurisdiction. So I think that we need to streamline it, look at it, examine it, and figure out ways to streamline it to make it easier for folks to build ADUs, for folks to build triplexes or duplexes, for developers to be able to build. And so I think zoning reform is definitely something that is one of my priorities. If we're going to be able to build enough housing that meets the needs of every single person at all income levels in all generations within the urban growth areas. And somebody might have mentioned this as well, but also collaborating with other cities, right? I know how, I've heard about how Ridgefield and Camas feel about growth. I understand they want to preserve their natural spaces as well, but we need to collaborate and they need to understand that they need to take their fair share of growth as well over the next 20 years.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, I could change the subject though.
Oh, go ahead.
No, Chuck, I was looking and, so one of your campaign, promises is the no tolls on a new I-5 bridge.
Yeah.
So, I want you to talk a little bit about that and how you think the county council can, influence a federal decision.
Well, for sure. I mean, obviously you don't have just a federal decision, but you have two cities, two counties, federal government, two state governments that are all involved in this. But the county council has had a history of not only voting, but being on the different boards that it has seats on to be able to gain access to information and to influence that decision. And so obviously it's not something that I can sit there and say, yep, I'll be able to say no to this. But what I can say is that I will put myself on the boards on those teams where I can get the information and influence the outcome towards no tolling.
Okay, so if it's a bridge with tolls or no bridge, are you a no bridge person?
Well, to me, it's more complicated than that. But if it's a bridge with the same number of lanes with tolls, then I'm a no.
Okay, so no new bridge.
If it's not increasing capacity across the river, it doesn't make any sense.
What about the current plan?
The current plan right now is a no.
Or no on the current?
A no on the current plan, yes.
Thanks. So, Will, you wanna, take that on a little bit, talk a little bit about what the county's role should be, in the I-5 bridge discussion?
Well, we can make recommendations and suggestions, and that's about it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it is the decision of the states and the cities and the federal government to decide if this build the bridge is built. I support building this bridge. We need better infrastructure in our communities. That bridge is what, 90, almost 100 years old. It sits on wooden piles, right? My biggest concern, if there is a moderate to severe earthquake, that bridge is going to fall into the river, right? Putting a lot of lives at risk and having a negative economic impact on a region. If I remember correctly, roughly $13 billion worth of goods cross that bridge every single day, right? We just cannot afford. We need to we need to be proactive and solve this problem now. Again, at the end of the day, the council has no say. We can influence and recommend, but we've got no control over it. So the state and the cities will decide, but I do support replacing this bridge, and that should have been done 10, 15 years ago.
John, what's your take?
Yeah, that bridge is absolutely vital to the I-5 corridor and moving commerce and goods up and down the West Coast. I am absolutely in favor of having that bridge be built. And if that does mean tolls, nobody is a fan of tolls. It's a user tax, and it does have an impact on working families moving across the bridge. And it is a problem, but nevertheless, recognizing the position of the county council as being not the one who makes the decision, but that being in the hands of the federal government and the two respective state legislatures, to not be an obstacle in this because of its extreme and vital importance for our local economy, as well as the entire economy of the United States being such a vital link of the West Coast. With that in mind, I think within the role of the county council is to focus on how do we make this a better business community here, so less people have to even commute across that bridge and have to make that trek. And so we can only go there for Blazers games rather than having to go there every day for work. I think, how do we use the position that we have rather than being an obstacle that has already thwarted this bridge from being built 10, 15 years ago, and it already has the problems compounding on one another. Every day we delay the bridge, I've heard said, is that it costs an extra $1 million in terms of expenses and costs that's going to be added on to the project due to the increased inflation costs of the goods and the workers and all that. And so we need to move forward with this. And on the county council, I would be a partner in that endeavor. And
So how do we improve the economy on this side and keep workers here?
anything we can do to attract businesses that want to come here and open up any shops, any regulations we can look at on the county council's level. Whatever we can do in that capacity of working with our Chamber of Commerce to see what ideas they have in order to bring jobs, and to see what's going on in Portland as well, to see if we can attract businesses that want to make the move as well, or anywhere else.
Chuck, what can we do to keep workers on this side of the river?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is to stop increasing taxes. And so those taxes go into businesses, it costs businesses more, it costs the people working in the businesses more. That as taxes increase, I think it's detrimental to business growth. And then the other side of it would again be going back to zoning, the policies and procedures for building, the red tape and regulation that could be deemed unnecessary or unnecessary costs that are being passed along to businesses to come here. would be refining and reducing those things, making it a streamlined process for businesses to be able to come in, build their business and do business in the county.
Will, what are your thoughts? How do we?
Yeah, absolutely. Small businesses are the backbone of our local economy. Part of the role that I perform in my current full-time job at Fourth Plain Forward is small business outreach. I am out there along the Fourth Plain corridor talking to small businesses, trying to understand what the struggles and challenges are. And a lot of the conversations that we engage in have to do with the lack of support that they get from local government, right? A lot of these small business owners are renting themselves, right? They're renting the households in which they live in, the homes in which they live in. They are living paycheck to paycheck, having to work 12, 13, 15 hours a week to keep their businesses afloat. They don't have resources. There are very few organizations, unlike in Portland, for example, that provide the level of support that they need in order to successfully learn how to manage their business. That's what, and we, to a degree, that's what the organization that I work does, helps with, right? But we are also bound by limited funding, right? As a nonprofit, it happens a lot. But we provide as much support as we possibly can. And so I think that that's, in order to continue to stimulate our economy, we really need to focus in local government, whether it's county, in an unincorporated Clark County or city, in the city of Vancouver or any other jurisdiction, it needs to be able to, figure out ways to support local small businesses and allow for small businesses to thrive.
So tell me something that the county government is doing well. We'll start with John.
Well, given our limited resources that we put into our Parks Department, I am definitely a big fan of what we do in that regard. I think how small the budget it has, it does pack a punch definitely above its weight, both the providing neighborhood parks in our unincorporated areas of Vancouver or up north of Vancouver and Hazeldale and all that, but also our larger community parks are also an excellent resource for the community. And I think the county does a great job with that. Obviously, there's room for improvement. I think there's some more conversations related to Heritage Park and all that, but nevertheless, I think.
Chuck, what's something the county government does well?
I think they've done a really good job in the past couple of years resourcing our sheriff's office, taking funds and allocating it towards body cameras, but also cameras in places that give the police officers not only accountability, but also protection in terms of being able to be in places where all of their actions are on film and verifiable. I think that taking the money to put it towards the county jail is another place where as difficult as it is to do that, and the money that it costs, it's going to be a huge improvement for the county. And so I think that's one of the places that the council's done a really good job in the past few years.
Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they've done a good job of maintaining roads. I drive on county roads. I visit friends out, out in the rural Clark County. So they've done a really good job of that. They've done a good job of keeping us safe. Funding the sheriff's department. Again, there's a lot of room for improvements, but they've done a pretty good job in that space. They've done a good job of maintaining the county parks as well. So.
Yeah, and I want to go back on, Chuck, you mentioned the sheriff's office, and on your website, you mentioned crime stats over the, how do we continue to adequately fund the sheriff's office if we want to cut expenses?
Well, again, cutting expenses doesn't mean that you're going to go, hey, everybody's going to cut 10% across the board. Again, the budget, and as it was mentioned before, getting into the budget and understanding the budget is a deep dive, and it should not be that way. The budget needs to be produced and put out in a way where it's completely transparent, and that will allow the kind of accountability and revision that's needed to be able to look and say, so what are we spending money on? Why are we spending money on it? Is it effective? And if it's not, then let's stop doing it.
Why do you think it is so difficult to get that understanding? Is it subterfuge on the part of?
Oh, I don't suspect anything like that. I think when you start to get budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars and trying to keep transparency and accountability, it becomes very, very difficult. And so, but sometimes that efforts for transparency and accountability actually end up making things more convoluted because you're trying to allocate every little thing into a certain place. And a lot of times people who don't have that heavy accounting background aren't able to get into those budget reports and fully understand it.
Yeah, so soon fireworks sales are going to begin throughout Clark County and but not in the city of Vancouver. So it's a lot of people in the city of Vancouver still don't seem to realize. There's been a growing, not a tidal wave, but still a growing chorus of people saying it's time to eliminate fireworks in Clark County, period. And we know that it's a very contentious subject. So I'm going to start with John. What is your take on fireworks?
I think there's a grave risk regarding fireworks, especially when it comes into the areas that have the houses very close to one another, in an area where there already is a strained fire department resources for the county. And so when we have people playing with fireworks on the 4th of July in these very suburban areas, it's a pretty big risk. There's multiple fires around the county. I've even heard about past county councilors' houses catching on fire in previous years, and that's a huge risk, and it's an unnecessary risk. And I don't understand maybe outside of the urban growth area but then you have the risk of forest fires, and so I'd have to see any studies on that. But nevertheless, I think in the current state, to be in an area where the fireworks are going off, both in terms of the impact on your neighbors, whether it's through fire, whether it's through the noises, on pets, on veterans, and other communities that have a concern with this, I think it is a big concern and it should be something that the county council does look at getting rid of. And I've heard people hide behind the fact that, the Port of Vancouver, they don't do a fireworks show, so therefore people should do this. And that's passing the buck in my view, rather than making the hard decision. And furthermore, I don't know if it says anywhere in the Second Amendment or anywhere else in the Constitution where fireworks are a guaranteed right either. So I have some concerns with it, and I would be open to.
You have concerns, but would you support a ban?
I think so.
Okay, Will, how about you?
I would support a ban as well. As John mentions, my biggest concern, is of course with the threat, climate change and increase in forest fires, particularly in a lot of rural areas, that there's risk of fires happening, right? That's gonna happen. Year after year, we read in the news about houses catching fire, forest fires starting as a result of fireworks. The impact that it has on folks, on pets, on animals, on dogs. I just don't think it's worth it. I think that jurisdictions can probably play a little role in having some of these fireworks shows, because people do love fireworks, right? And so I think that maybe jurisdictions can probably bring back some of those fireworks instead of having to cross that bridge over to Portland to look at them. I think that can be localized, but I would completely and absolutely support a ban on fireworks.
Okay. Now, to play devil's advocate here, you said you don't know if it's worth it. Shouldn't that be up to individuals to decide if it's worth it?
I think government plays a role in helping influence behavior, right? Because I think most of us understand the risks. Whether you are for fireworks or not, you understand the risk of fireworks. And so I think that banning them really mitigates some of that risk. People will still burn fireworks. I back in the 90s, I grew up in Long Beach, right? Where fireworks have been banned for decades, yet people still bought fireworks, right? And nobody got in trouble, unfortunately. But I think people will still, I think if we can mitigate some of that risk, I think then we'll be okay.
Chuck, what's your feeling?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't support a fireworks ban. I definitely don't think that the county council or government should be in a position to decide whether or not things are worth it or not. I think that there is personal freedom and responsibility and accountability. I do know that the regulations for fireworks have been tightened more and more and more over even the decades that I've been in Clark County. And I think it comes down to just that. And so, like Will was saying, if there's a law banning something and there's not enforcement, is there actually a law banning it, or is it really just something that we're saying, hey, this is a good idea and don't do it? I don't think that a ban is helpful, but I think increased accountability, responsibility, education, and those sorts of things that come along with firework use, just like so many other things that we have in our society that can be dangerous. That doesn't mean that we're in the position to outright take those away from the people of Clark County.
So you would support perhaps a little stepped up enforcement? Perhaps this has been another one of the complaints, is that there is the ability out there to cite people, but it doesn't seem to happen very often.
For sure, yeah, and I don't know the statistics on that, but I can definitely say that I've experienced that in terms of, hey, here's the days that fireworks are allowed and legal in the unincorporated parts of Clark County outside of the city of Vancouver. And you'll hear fireworks going off before, after, and everything else. And I don't know, like, I can't say that I've seen or heard a story of enforcement happening with that. And so I would say the same thing. If we're going to say that this is when fireworks are allowed, then we need to have the resources to be able to go in there and make sure that that's what's happening.
A number of years ago, the county voters adopted a home rule charter after a period of what was seen as cronyism and insiderness in county government, particularly amongst the what was then the Clark County Commission. So the charter has done a lot of things to do that, to change that, but recently, two of the outgoing county councilors said that they wish there were more private meetings and private decisions that were made. In addition, the county manager rarely, if ever, speaks on the record outside of county council meetings. So, do you feel like there's still any kind of trouble with transparency in county government? And if so, what would you do to counter that? So, John, you want to take that on first?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think in terms of the design of the county government, having a county manager style of government, council manager style of government, there is some issues in terms of having the county able to access any information outside of the county manager. They act as the bottleneck to all information, and they have executive powers that are pretty substantial in terms of how they run the county. So one of my concerns, I think, in general, I mean, in terms of transparency, do I have to answer that specifically, or can I go into other ideas about the county council or county government?
Well, answer it the best way you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of transparency, or in terms of the way the county is currently working, is that it's hard for councilors to get information without going around the county manager, which is a perception that I don't necessarily agree with. I think as a councilor, you should be able to have access information with different staff, different departments, and have a direct contact with them rather than necessarily being entirely dependent on the county manager. Further, I would be very much open to the idea of a direct election for the county manager role, having a county executive like they do have in Pierce and King County, to have more of a accountability for the position, have more of a citizen input on who is holding that position that has quite a bit of power, and as well as more ability for the county council to access information and to work within the structures of county government without necessarily relying only on one person.
You say that county councilors have trouble getting information from county government. Does the general public have that difficulty also?
That would be, I guess that would depend on what the issue is. I think the general public only has the opportunity to speak at the meetings, which is more so than the city of Vancouver offers these days, at least in terms of public comment. But in terms of getting the information, I think the county does a pretty good job of having a good amount of resources on their website to get access to. And I generally work within the confines of the Public Lands Department as a member of the Clark County Parks Advisory Board, which I find to be very easy to work with them. But in terms of getting information from other departments, I guess I would have to get more experience on. I've found the elections department so far to be pretty easy to work with and getting information from so far. But hopefully that answers your question.
Chuck, what's your view on transparency in Clark County government, and whether that's adequate or needs to be improved? Or
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that anytime that we're talking about government, I think that you always should be looking at how transparency and accountability can be improved. And so I actually appreciate the fact that the Clark County Council currently has public meetings. I understand that the way that the Clark County Council interacts with the county manager is that they have supervisory powers over the county manager. And so this would be a place where I would say, listen, the county manager reports to the council and the council reports to the people. And that accountability should be set up like that. I don't think that every or any employee of the county should have to be out doing press releases or talking about particular issues when those things fall back on the county councilors. Now, that being said, if there is an issue in terms of getting information and things like that, particularly for the councilors, the councilors should have access to the information they need to make the decisions that they need to make. And their decisions are the budget decisions, supervising the county manager, and then zoning, policy, and all of those things. And so the information should flow pretty easily. And if it's more difficult for the county for the county councilor to get the information than, say, for a private citizen to do a public information request, that would definitely be something that would need to be addressed.
Well, I think that we could all agree when we try to do our homework and access of the county budget and financials, we all struggled, right? And so, you know, that I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there is a lack of transparency there. And I think Chuck makes a valid point. The county manager reports to the council, right? And the council reports to the people, right? And the people, you know, hold us accountable. And so I fully support more transparency if that is what the residents of Clark County are asking for.
Anything else?
No,
Then we'll go through, give us your final pitch for why the people of Clark County should support you, and feel free to mention any notable endorsements you care to share. And we'll start with Chuck.
Yeah, for sure. So again, I'm a long-term resident of Clark County. I've raised my 8 children here with my wife. We've had a lot of experience in volunteering and just being a part of this community for multiple decades. We care very much for our home here, and I want to be able to say that my grandchildren will be able to be raised and have the same experience that my children had being raised in Clark County. Now, that being said, I think that taxes are a big issue and need to be addressed, and that families should not be burdened with taxes when the county government has not gone through a process to evaluate its expenditures, prioritize those expenditures, and cut the budget as it's needed. I think that public safety is a huge issue, and that homelessness needs to be addressed through conversations with social services, with the cities, with the sheriff's office to reduce those factors in mental health and addiction that are causing homelessness. In addition to that, I think that zoning needs to be taken care of where property can be affordable and people can move into this county and raise their families here, have a backyard for their kids to play in, and all of those things that we've enjoyed in this county for the past decades. Safety is a huge issue. I was in Evergreen High School when the shooting happened there, and I would be a huge proponent of getting SROs back into our schools and looking at some of those public safety funds that the county has to make sure that happens as well. And then the last thing I would say is just that I don't think that tolls are something that are going to benefit any family here. While the I-5 bridge doesn't lay in District 3, the 205 bridge does. And what tolls will do is projections say is increase congestion on that bridge by 30 to 40%. And that'll be a huge factor for people in District 3 of Clark County. So I would be opposed to any sort of cost being levied onto our families here, including tolls.
All right, thank you. John, final pitch.
Absolutely. I am a candidate that can work with other people. I can build bridges of people with different ideologies. I'm a big believer in trying to bring people around the table and understand all sides of an issue before making a stance on it. I am a big believer in having the city build a better working relationship with the different cities in our county, as exemplified by several endorsements by several mayors in this county, including the mayors of Shogel and Battleground, as well as making sure that the county council just doesn't blame Olympia, doesn't blame Washington, but actually has a working relationship with our representatives there, as I also have an endorsement of several state representatives in the county as well, both in the 17th and in the 18th. In that regard, though, I am working towards making homeownership more available for more people in Clark County. Owning a home is more than an investment in wealth. It is a means of building the wealth to start a family and the security to do so. And so this is an opportunity that's been denied to so many people, and it's getting increasingly further and further out of reach. And this is a position that can make a huge impact on it, which is why I am running for the county council. Nevertheless, we must protect our open spaces and our outdoor recreational areas as well. And on the county council, prior to being on the county council, I worked within the confines of the Clark County Parks Advisory Board. So I have a lot of working experience within the county. And in that role, I've got to meet with a lot of different constituencies with different ideas. And I will continue to carry that forth with me, both working with the county staff, as well as listening to the concerns of the community for charting a path forward.
Thank you. Well,
Yeah. I'm inspired every single day by the warmth of this community. As I mentioned earlier, I spend almost every day, well, now with campaigning, almost every night as well, but every day working with community, talking to community members, talking to residents of Clark County, talking to small business owners, talking to community-based organizations. I understand the challenges that impact our community day in, day out. Right, my 3 priorities, I think, are essential to be able to address the challenges that are impacting our community day to day. Housing, we need land reform. Zoning reform. It has to happen. Otherwise, the average price of housing will continue to be out of reach for residents of our community. We need to build housing that meets the needs of all income levels in all generations. Right. It has to be an inclusive approach that we take to dealing with the housing crisis in this county. Mental health and addiction. As someone who has seen loved ones struggle with addiction on a regular basis, it is incredibly painful to see community members having to deal with it, oftentimes with enough support. There aren't enough beds in treatment centers in our county to be able to address this massive issue. People are dying in the streets. These are our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our friends. And I believe that we have a moral responsibility to be able to support these folks. Government responsiveness is another one of my priorities. I believe that government, particularly in council, needs to be more supportive of Clark County employees, right? To ensure that morale is at a high level. We need to engage with the community a lot more. This is something that I'm seeing often more and more, where the city of Vancouver does a really good job of holding forums and talking to folks. They're out, the mayor Ann is out there talking to folks on a regular basis. I don't see the council doing that. Council needs to engage more. They need to listen more. They need to talk more. They need to be able to understand what people are struggling with, what the challenges are, so that we can be informed to make those decisions. I care about Vancouver. I care about Clark County. I care about our farmland, and I firmly believe that we should not be expanding, at least for the next decade, the urban growth area. We need to preserve farmland. It's where we get our food. It's where a lot of people make their living. It's where we play. It's where we get clean water. And so I think it's important to be able to focus on those things. We can take a look at the urban growth area in another 10 years. We don't have to expand it anytime soon, but we also need to collaborate, and other jurisdictions need to understand that they are also responsible for ensuring that they provide enough housing for their community members. This is a great community. I love it. Every day I interact with somebody, I see smiles, I see the warmth, and I want to be part of that. And I want to contribute to making Clark County a place that is inclusive, that everybody is welcome, that's going to thrive, and look towards the future. Because I intend to be here until the day I die. And so I want to make sure that in 20, 30 years, I am happy with the decisions that were made today.
great. Well, thank you. Thanks to all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.